Today, I'd like to talk briefly about the proposed hate crimes legislation that has now passed the House and is awaiting Senate approval. There are several, I suppose, stances or viewpoints on this issue, and I'd like to briefly go through them and analyze them. The first is against hate crimes legislation from a federalism standpoint, which means that basically the federal government should stay out of this, and that this is really an issue that should be settled on a state-by-state basis. I'm not sure I entirely agree, per se, with this view, but I can certainly sympathize with it, and I have a lot of respect for it. Much as I don't believe the federal government should get involved in banning gay marriage or abortions, there is a sense that federalism should allow states to make these kinds of decisions for themselves. The second, also, which is also against hate crimes legislation, comes from a more, I don't want to say sinister, but a more, I don't know, I guess a scarier stance for me, and that comes from the conservative religious right. And many of them seem to feel that they would be in favor of hate crimes legislation that protected certain classes, such as race and gender, but purposely leave out sexual orientation. And in fact, James Dobson used or opined a couple of days ago that passing this bill would be tantamount to criminalizing thoughts, basically, those who read and interpret the Judeo-Christian Bible in a certain way would be guilty of a thought crime for disagreeing with homosexuality or for being anti-gay. I think, however, this is very flawed, because the legislation has nothing to do with thoughts. I mean, you can't legislate thoughts, and you can't legislate hate. But what you can do is say that the results of hate, in terms of criminal activity, violent criminal activity, beating someone up, killing someone, raping someone, should be punishable to a greater extent than similar crimes not motivated by any sort of hatred for any particular group. For me, that's the motivating reason for why I support hate crimes legislation at the federal level. When are we as a nation going to finally stand up and say no to racism and bigotry and homophobia and sexism? We're in the 21st century. It's time that we retake our place as a leader in this world. And denying hate crimes legislation, saying that that crimes motivated by hate are no worse than crimes that are not motivated by hate, is dangerous. We need to, as a country, come to grips with our past and move towards the future. As JFK once said, change is the law of life, and those who look only to the past or to the present are certain to miss the future. Gay rights are here to stay. They're not going away. And society is trending towards a greater level of acceptance. And for those who choose not to follow that trend, they will be left behind. I have no doubt in my mind that eventually gay marriage will be legalized in all 50 states and the territories. And this hatred, this bigotry is un-American. And people who allow themselves to be controlled by fear ultimately lose out. I think that's it for today. Basically, I'm in favor of hate crimes legislation. I think it's necessary. I think it's appropriate. And thank you for listening.